Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and welcome back to the Division Resurgence. I hope those of you who have jumped in so far have been enjoying the game since it launched about 2 weeks ago. I know I've only done one video on it so far, things have just been crazy, hectic since Year 8 Season 1 came out at the exact same time. I do hope to do at least 1 to 2 more Resurgence videos in the very near future now that the rush has kind of died down, so stay tuned for those if you're interested. But I've just been playing the game in the background. I reached level 40 this past weekend, started working on putting together an endgame build, and so at this point, having seen the full campaign, I've interacted with most of the game systems, it made me just want to come on here and talk about it a little bit. I've read a lot of commentary online about people's thoughts on Resurgence, right? Is this a good mobile title? Is it a good Division game? Is it a good game overall? And one really interesting point that I keep coming back to that I reference in the title is I've seen some people saying, are some of the features that we see in this game what the Division 1 might have one day evolved into had it continued on with content releases, in a way, making this like the Division 1.5. Now, to be very clear, I'm not saying that Resurgence is as good as the Division 1 was, nowhere close. There's a pretty long list of things that I either dislike about the game, for instance the gambling forms of monetization that exist within the store, I don't think the storyline is particularly compelling or well written, or other areas that I think have potential but just need some big improvements like PvP, balancing and implementation, menu navigation, and more. Despite all of those things, however, I also don't want to ignore what innovations and improvements have been made here to the Division formula, and I think in an ideal scenario, any and all Division projects and content from here on out should be analyzed and considered when developing the Division 3, right? That is the eventual next step that we're heading towards. So more or less, what I want to get out of this video is just talking about what new and cool things Resurgence tries, and how I hope to see that continued and improved even further down the line. So we'll jump right into it. If you do want to see some more Resurgence videos here on the channel, I am working on a few, so be sure to subscribe. A big shout out and thank you to our channel members as always. You've heard it a million times, but I appreciate so much what you do to support myself and my work on here. But without further ado, let's go. The first topic that I would love to talk about is the open world in Resurgence. The presentation that we've seen of it here is much more in an MMO style compared to what we've seen in the Division 1 and 2, and I think that is going to be divisive by nature. For me, this is the exact kind of direction that I've wanted to see the Division go in for years, lean into the MMO aspects and the online social features. So I have so far really enjoyed this presentation of the open world in Resurgence. That said, I know there are also many of you out there who played the Division 2 and prefer to keep their world quiet and private. So maybe if this were to someday be brought to the mainline games, there could be some kind of toggle or other option to not have this enabled by default. In case you didn't know, the open world in Resurgence is fully shared, so you can run into other players out there. Everybody has the same open world activities on their map that they can travel to and engage with at the same time, and in many ways I think this just kind of provides the experience that I believe many have always wanted out of a PvE Dark Zone idea, and that is really just leaning into the notions of cooperation and efficiency. To be fair, I don't think Resurgence so far fully takes advantage of this idea and tech that they've implemented. There is currently really no open world content that necessitates having all of these players at the same time at once, but whether it is in future content or in the Division 3 down the road, if they were to add this, I would love to see the Division's take on world bosses. I think back to my days in World of Warcraft, how there would be these massive world bosses that would pop up for limited times. Everybody had to flock there, fight them. They were really tough fights, but they also rewarded really good loot. I could see Division doing like an armored convoy driving across the world that you have to try and take on before it reaches its objective. Plenty of ways they could do it, I'm sure. Or if not bosses, then maybe there would just be some kind of weather events that happen that end up making solo content in the open world harder, and so in those cases it would be more effective to run together in groups. I don't know, I just think having the tech to do this enables so many different possibilities, and those possibilities alone are quite neat. Another big one that I want to hit on is clans, right? The clan feature in the Division Resurgence goes way more in depth than the Division 2's does, and I think many of the things we see here would be awesome to see introduced to the larger franchise. The biggest change, at least the one that's right in front of your face, is the fact that Resurgence has a clan base. This is a private space that your clan members can travel to and use. It comes with different components and modules that clan members can work together to upgrade, and once upgraded, those things provide some really distinct and nice benefits. Stuff like reduced crafting time, extra deconstruction value, and more. There's also stuff like daily donation benefits if you're an active member within your clan. There are specific clan objectives and activities within the game, like with nest investigations. Overall, the whole system here is just much more fleshed out and in-depth compared to its Division 2 counterpart. Now, in a hypothetical Division 3 scenario, I think that the gameplay benefits of being in a clan would likely need to be toned down at least slightly, right? You don't want to make non-clan participants feel completely left behind, but I think some kind of middle ground could be reached, right? Make it more than what the Division 2 offers these days, which is quite minimal, but maybe not quite as impactful and game-changing as Resurgence seems to be so far. Should this overall idea go forward, I think it would be neat to see much more emphasis placed on the clan base. As far as I know, the one in Resurgence is not really customizable. You can just upgrade the different upgrades that every clan has access to, but I think having a space that can be customized and can reflect its members would be really cool. Totally random example here, but the dojos that they have in Warframe are a really cool example of this system and the potential that it has. Obviously, some of the level of customization and wacky things you can do there is not quite applicable to the Division world and lore, but you get my idea. Also, I think clan competition would be a huge thing they could lean into. Let different clans engage in self-selected challenges, or the game could officially host clan competitions either monthly or seasonally, and that stuff is kind of just easy engagement, if you will. You know, people are going to want to go in, rep their clans, especially if there's cool cosmetic rewards to earn. Overall, I just think the more clan depth that you have, the greater connection and activity that you will see in the game in the long term. Touching on the Dark Zone then for a moment, that's right, the infamous piece of Division content has returned here in Resurgence. Now, as I mentioned back in the intro, I believe that the current balancing for PvP in the endgame is quite bad, but this is not about that. This is more about the actual DZ mechanics and system. Firstly, the Dark Zone here is actually rewarding, which is already a big leg up compared to modern day Division 2, right? You have a reason to want to go into the Dark Zone. Resurgence features a timer on your Dark Zone runs. When you go in, you have 20 minutes to get in, loot, and get out before the contamination rises and you die. It's been a controversial take of mine in recent times that I believe implementing some form of time limiting could benefit a theoretical Division 3 DZ, and yes, there have been many that have pushed back on me about that idea, which is completely fine. But interestingly, from seeing what has played out in the Resurgence DZ since launch, I believe what you've seen is that due to the high reward of the Dark Zone and the time constraint, the result is that much fewer people are flagging Rogue out of boredom or to specifically grief people. When people do it, it is intentional, it is strategically timed to try and score the most loot, which is the intention of the system. The Rogue feature is there to score more loot rather than just PvP without reason. So I don't know, if you were somebody who was opposed to the idea of a timer in the Division 3's DZ, I think it could be potentially worth analyzing or just looking at how people behave in Resurgence's one, and I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts, even if your position hasn't actually changed on it. But beyond the timer, what's really fascinating is how many additional quality of life features have been added that in many ways aid PvE players, which, for the record, I think is great. The Dark Zone is meant to be the best spot to farm in the game, just with the added risk of PvP because of that. And I personally think it is far more appropriate to go down the route of adding things like these that we'll take a look at, rather than going so far as to add a whole PvE Dark Zone, which I believe compromises the intended Dark Zone vision. But what I'm getting at is that in the DZ safe houses, instead of there being the usual vendor, you get a smuggler. And this NPC provides you with a variety of services which you can pay for with DZ currency. This includes resetting your virus filter, which is very important for traversing some areas in Resurgence's DZ. You can also pay to get a live ping on other players' locations, which is huge for strategizing a quick extraction if you're trying to get something out that you really want. But in addition to that, you can also pay to smuggle out your contaminated items and not have to extract at all. pretty wild, right? Now, currently, I think the cost for that is a little low. Ideally, you would want that option to be like a last resort and still promote the extraction loop. But just the concept of this NPC, these services, I think is a really cool evolution of the DZ idea. And again, I really hope to see some innovation in the Division 3's take on this kind of content. All right, and then the last big thing that I wanted to touch on was some of the build features that we see present here in Resurgence. Now, if you've listened to the channel for a while, some of this might be repeat. I brought these things up specifically ever since we first saw them in some of Resurgence's first betas. But Resurgence has some amazing in-game resources to help people better understand build crafting, gear systems, all of it. And I think in an age where so many Division 2 players flock to the internet for guidance or answers on these subjects, and most of the time they just end up getting endlessly conflicting information, prioritizing in-game assets in a Division 3 or other projects like seen here in Resurgence, I believe would be very beneficial for the long-term health and retention of the game. The first one of these is specialization training. This guides you through using your different specialization abilities. It informs and promotes that you use gear that synergizes with your specific class, and in doing all of these things, it gives you rewards along the way to be able to further upgrade your specialization. But even more useful than that is the build making database. This thing is a game changer because it lets you view any and every gear and weapon related thing in one menu. That includes exotic items, it includes talents across gear and weapons, stats, stat descriptions, set bonuses. As I said, literally anything you would need to know for what options exist to make a build out there are right here in one menu. Now, the Division 2 sort of has this with the library, but I believe that this menu goes much more in depth and I think works better as an educational resource. And so again, I would love to see some features like this put into the Division 3, so long as they're properly highlighted and navigatable. But if so, I think it will aid casual players specifically in much better comprehending these kinds of systems. Well, there you have it, everybody. Those are some of my rambling thoughts on the Division Resurgence a few weeks after launch, what areas of the game I think have seen neat innovations and where I think those ideas could be taken in the future. I'm sure I could probably come up with many more small things here in the game, but I figured at least for this video I'd keep it to some of the main categories. At this point, I would love to know your guys' thoughts on anything here. Now that we're about 2 weeks out from launch, what are your thoughts on the overall game so far? What's your take on the notion that in many ways Resurgence is kind of like a Division 1.5? Do you think there is anything within the game here that is worth carrying forward for future Division ideas and projects? Maybe you think the entire thing is terrible and should be left behind. Wherever you're coming at it from, I would love to hear your thoughts down below. That's going to do it for me on this one though. Thank you all very much for coming by and watching. I'll catch you back soon, but until then, RogueGold. Ow. Oh! We just got a Ravenous! Haha! I might not be friendly. Let's go.
Coming to the Division 2.
Let's go!
And